Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of The Institute episode 6. Before I jump into my review, make sure to follow me at Steve Varley Show on Instagram. It helps in so many ways. I could really use the followers. I do a bunch of movie reviews there, memes, celebrity interview clips. It's a lot of fun. I could really appreciate the support. And also make sure after this review to check out my interview with Ben Barnes and Joe Freeman from The Institute. It's a really good time. It will be linked below. So we'll start with everything going on with Luke and Tim in this episode. Then we'll go towards Sigsby and what's going on at The Institute. And then at the end where they kind of cross paths. Now we start right where we left off, where Luke is able to escape under the fence just in time, right when that watchdog was on his way. I have no idea, though, why Luke threw those scissors on the other side of the fence. It was very convenient of a way to get Maureen in trouble. He should have thrown them over the fence the other direction. But while he's escaped, he has to now get to the red steps to meet Maureen. And what's interesting is Tim is also going that direction. So we're excited here because we know finally these two are going to meet up. What's interesting is Tim finds in the woods these carvings from the teens who died, and he believes this was a cabin they would hang out at, and thinks Stackhouse is the one who took it down, which definitely is the case. So I'm excited to hopefully see a flashback of what exactly went down during that, and there's a little more information to that story, but it is intriguing. I also like the sequence of Luke having to swim in the water and hide from the flashlight of the security guard on the bridge. It felt like something you would do in a video game in one of those sequences where you're trying to hide from a villain. So I thought that was actually shot pretty good and fun. Now we get this big moment where Tim and Luke finally meet up. And you see it's light out now too, so you know poor Wendy isn't getting her car back in time for work. Now we see how they're going to handle with Luke with people having this TP power. And he says to Tim, I think you're telling the truth, but I'm not strong enough to know. God, I wish Avery was here, because he knows Avery's stronger. And Avery probably has that power where he can actually read the thoughts and what they're actually saying, where Luke clarifies he really only sees the feelings that are going on in someone's head and goes from there. Now, my biggest problem with the writing in this episode is this convenient line they say 3 times in this episode. That is, you're not going to believe me anyway. So it happens the first time here where Luke says to Tim, I need to get to the red steps. You're not going to believe me anyway. This avoids Luke having to fully explain everything that has happened right away to Tim. But this isn't the big issue I have of it being used. We'll get to that as the episode goes on. But very soon after, Tim says to him, you're going to tell me the whole story on the way to the car. And then again, Luke says, you're never going to believe me, you know. But thank God Tim responds to this saying, you would be surprised what I believe. So it gives you relief that Tim is an open mind to things that sound more outlandish like TP and TK, and that we'll see that Luke is sensing that in him. But I like they showed Luke use his powers in front of Tim to already convince him of this being true. And I love to see that Tim, when he sees the article that Luke is a suspect for his parents' murder, he really knows what's going on. This is a cover-up, and can see that Luke is a good kid and hugs him. And I love that moment where Luke does the TP power to him and can at least see that Tim wants to help him, which is a good character trait of Tim and wanting to help the weak. Now, before we go back to Tim and Luke, let's go to everything with Sigsby and the Institute. So Sigsby has a fun episode. It's actually my favorite performance by Mary-Louise Parker yet in the show, where I've been lukewarm on it so far, but this episode really stood out for me. I thought she was great. She finds the sabotage that was done to the AC. She can put together that it's Ellis who did this. And we see Stackhouse inform Sigsby about this, Tim the Night Knocker. So they both agree they want him stopped from lurking around. Now, they find the scissors that Luke threw towards the building. Now they can trace who checked them out, which is going to obviously get Maureen in trouble. But I also like this moment they threw in this scene that Sigsby pulls at Stackhouse's hate for her and jealousy that he was the one who trained her and now she has surpassed him. It was good to get a little more insight into the relationship. Now, poor Maureen will see Stackhouse and Sigsby with the scissors on camera. She knows she is screwed. So she calls her journalist contact. She says, get Luke somewhere safe to tell his story. And she doesn't tell the story on the phone because she has to say, you wouldn't believe me anyway, which had me dying. I was like, of course they have that line there. Like, this one's about to kill herself and probably should have at least told a reporter everything she knew. That would be the realistic thing to happen, but story has to happen. But anyway, we know from our perspective, at least as the audience, that it wouldn't make a difference because this reporter is not a good person and is working for Stackhouse. But I thought it was hysterical they used that line. And it was a cool reveal that that was the trap. The reporter was actually the reporter that we know is a hench lady for Stackhouse. I do like on Maureen's way out. She at least wrote on the floor, hell is waiting. But where Stackhouse just seemed out of character, like very stupid, was thinking that Maureen was delusional in telling the reporter that she helped a kid out. Like, no way any of these kids would escape. But Sigsby at least is a smart one in this episode and wants a physical head count that knows something's up with the chips here and finds a chip under his pillow. But we'll actually see, as much as Sigsby and Stackhouse disagree on things and don't like each other, they both agree if they call Frank Lapidus the big boss here, they're going up the chimney. So their plan they agree on is not to tell him that, get Luke back alive before they find out that someone has escaped for the first time in 70 years. This is where Stackhouse will send this double agent reporter, Kate, for Luke. So this is where the stories join. Now, Tim and Luke think they're going to meet Maureen here, but it's Kate, and Tim recognizes her from the bar. We know they've met before. And this is where you're so relieved that Luke can use his powers here to get out of the situation and use the TP on Kate and see that she's hiding something. So she pulls out a gun, and then you say, well, thank God for his other powers, the TK. So we're finally seeing his powers put to really good use and not being tested on. And he pulls the tree trunk down on her, and then Tim fully body checks her into a rock, and she falls into the river dead, which was intense. And this is big, like I said, because Tim's now seeing the proof of not only Luke's TP, but his TK. And I like how smart Luke's being coming out of the Institute and not trusting people. Like, he already doesn't trust the police chief they're about to tell everything to. And he's close here because we'll see the reveal is it's not the police chief who's bad, but it's the guy under him who's bad. And it's interesting layer they add to add suspense outside the Institute that there's all these secret agents that could be all over the town. Now, meanwhile, Sigsby and the team she has goes to the scene and finds the blood in Kate's phone, so she can obviously use this against Stackhouse, that his plans of just keep falling apart. So this is where Stackhouse goes to see Hendricks, and Stackhouse says to Hendricks that Sigsby's trying to make herself the hero to pin it on them. He says, when the time comes, you back whatever story I tell, and he wants to present as they're the fix to Sigsby's mismanagement. So it's actually a smart move by Stackhouse, because that's exactly how the upper management's going to look at this, that like he said, either the head coach has got to go or all the assistants, and they don't want to be the assistants that have to go. But it's going to be interesting to see where Hendricks' loyalty lies, where I like they put Hendricks in the middle of this, because he clearly agrees with Stackhouse on all these things, but he also has a sexual relationship with Sigsby. So that makes things a little more complicated, and we'll see where he goes. And you see, it's interesting that Stackhouse is just trying to make it day at a time here, where already Hendricks' mind is going to all the problems that he sees in the future. So it also complicates things. He's a very complicated character, which I like. It's interesting triangle, those three. So it makes that story for those three characters interesting going on, what they're all going to do now. So that's really stood out to me as a good bright point in this episode. So we get a really exciting cliffhanger here where Luke is brought to the police chief. We finally see the flash drive come out, and there's a video on there, which is a big cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger that the guy under the police chief is a mole. So I am excited now. I thought this was a really fun episode, even though that line I think is just hysterical. They kept using "you wouldn't believe me anyway." Brings the score down for me a little bit, but I think it was interesting, and it moved at a quick pace, and it's got me really intrigued now. I think having Tim and Luke together really excites things, and like I said, having the three villains all going ways you don't know they're going to turn on each other or not to work together, and still the mystery of the higher ups is exciting. So overall, I'm going to give this episode an 8.1. Let me know what you thought of it down below, and let me know your theories. No book spoilers, please. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of the Institute. I'm also reviewing Smoke at the moment as well. Please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Instagram. I'll help in so many ways you have no idea. And check out my interview with Ben Barnes and Joe Freeman themselves about the Institute. That'll be linked below. I'll see you next time.